So first we'll be discussing about cell wall. So what is the cell wall of plants made up of? Can someone tell me?
Cellulose.
Cellulose.
Yeah. So plant cell wall is made up of cellulose. What about fungi?
Chitin.
Yeah. In case of fungi, the cell wall is made up of chitin. What about bacteria? What is a bacterial cell wall made up of?
Peptidoglycan.
Right. So bacterial cell wall is made up of something called peptidoglycan or murin. What about animal cell wall? So plant cell wall is made up of cellulose, fungal cell wall is made up of chitin, and bacteria is made up of peptidoglycan. So you have already studied in lower classes, cell wall is a non-living structure. It is very rigid. It has some important functions. The first function is it provides shape to the cell. It also protects the cell from mechanical damage and infection. So that is because it is very rigid in nature. So that is why it can provide protection from mechanical damage and infection. Third point or third function, it also helps in cell-to-cell interaction. So these are the three important functions of cell wall. First one, it provides shape to the cell. Second one, it protects the cell from mechanical damage or infection. And third point is it helps in cell-to-cell interaction. So let's discuss what is the cell wall of algae made up of. So algae, even though they are plants, their cell wall is slightly different from higher plants. Algal cell wall is made up of cellulose, but it also contains galactans, mannans. These are sugars or polysaccharides. It also contains some minerals like calcium carbonate. So you should remember these few components. What is the algal cell wall made up of? So it contains four main components: cellulose, galactans, mannans, and calcium carbonate. In case of higher plants, it is mainly made up of cellulose, some hemicellulose, pectins, and proteins.
Sir,
Yes,
I want to tell that animal cells do not have cell walls.
yeah. Animal cells do not have cell wall, right? So in case of a young plant, they have a very thin cell wall. The first cell wall that is referred to as primary wall. The primary wall is the cell wall which is found in young plants. And this is the type of cell wall which can undergo growth. It is capable of growth. But what happens is when this young plant matures or when it becomes old, this primary cell wall will disappear or it disintegrates. So it will gradually diminish as the cell matures. And finally, this primary wall will be replaced by something called secondary wall, okay, which will be formed towards the inner side of the cell, towards the plasma membrane. So first, in case of younger plants, the cell wall is called a primary wall, which can undergo growth. But when the plant grows and matures, when it becomes old, this primary cell wall will disappear and it will be replaced by secondary cell wall towards the inner side of the membrane. Now, usually on the outer side of the cell wall, you'll find something called middle lamellae. So suppose this is a plant cell and this is the cell wall. There will be one more layer. So imagine this is another cell. So these are two plant cells which are close to each other, adjacent plant cells. So this is a cell wall and the plasma membrane. So just outside the cell wall, there will be a layer like this, and this is called middle lamellae. So middle lamellae is a layer which actually connects or glues two neighboring cells together. They will help in attachment of two nearby plant cells. So that is referred to as middle lamellae. So the word middle is used because it is found between two adjacent plant cells. This middle lamella is mainly made up of calcium and pectin. So we use the term calcium pectate. Sometimes it might also contain magnesium pectate, but mainly calcium pectate. So middle lamellae will hold or glue the different neighboring plant cells together. Always remember that middle lamella is found only in plant cells, not in bacteria or fungal cells. So middle lamella is something which is made up of calcium pectate and magnesium pectate. Its function is to attach two adjacent plant cells together. Now, the cell wall as well as the middle membrane might be traversed by something called plasmodesmata. Now, plasmodesmata will be found somewhere here, like this. So plasmodesmata is a small gap in this cell wall region. So the function of this gap or the plasmodesmata is to connect the cytoplasm of these two cells so that they can transport materials. Okay, so the materials from this first cell can go to the second cell through this plasma membrane. Sorry, plasmodesmata. So plasmodesmata is a small gap or a door through which materials can be transported from one plant cell to the next plant cell. So that's all about cell walls. So cell wall is a non-living structure. That is something you should remember. It is non-living. Cell membrane is a living structure. Cell wall is rigid and it gives shape to the cell, protects the cell from mechanical damage. It also helps in cell-to-cell interaction. Plant cell wall is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, pectins, and proteins. Algal cell wall is made up of cellulose, galactans, mannans, and calcium carbonate. Fungi, the cell wall is made up of chitin, and bacteria, it is made up of peptidoglycan. In a young plant, the cell wall is called primary wall, which is capable of growth, but when the plant matures, this will be replaced by something called secondary wall. Now, between the cell walls of two adjacent plant cells, there is something called middle lamellae, which will help them to attach these cells together. And this middle lamella is made up of calcium pectate or magnesium pectate. There is a small gap which is found between two adjacent plant cells. This is called plasmodesmata, and plasmodesmata will connect the cytoplasm of two adjacent plant cells and allow materials to go in and come out. So in the next slide, I'll show you an internal structure. This is the internal structure of plant cell wall. So you can see here, the bottom, the lower blue colored region, this is plasma membrane. So this is plasma membrane here. This one, this blue colored region. Then in the middle, you can see the primary cell wall, and it is made up of hemicellulose, cellulose, and pectin. Inner to the cell wall, you can see there is a plasma membrane. Then you have the primary cell wall, which is made up of three main things: pectin, cellulose microfibrils. So these are fibrous thread-like structures. Then you have hemicellulose. Outer to the primary cell wall, you'll find a layer called middle lamellae, which is made up of calcium.